Hello, hello. This is Majunda for episode 4 of the Majunda Minute. I am recording this at what is soon to be 12 o'clock. Why? I just feel like it. I postponed recording an episode today because I'm lazy, but and I can't do this for too long because I have to go to bed and get up for work in a few hours. So this is just kind of last minute. So, but I wanted to talk about a few things post 2.9, especially. I'll briefly talk about a Game Press article that was released today about the Cunnings and did they really benefit from this whole vulnerability change thing. So I'll start with like my thoughts on 2.9 like as a whole update. I like it, but like most updates, it has its flaws. um, it's more or less what it's really done is it's made swap in creatures just so much stronger, like swap in attackers, like. And this is a bit of an opinion of mine. I believe that, and if swap in moves, like I see swap in moves as they should be nothing but utility. I don't think they should have any form of attack, like any kind of damaging power, because then that just kind of creates a vacuum of creatures that are designed to just mess with things that are typically low health. That's why Cunnings were struggling so badly in the previous, in the last update, and ever since 2.0, and that was just mainly because of the fact that, besides the fact that they were completely shut down by resilient abilities, but like all Cunnings were pretty much entirely vulnerable to swap in attacks, like swap in savageries, swap in stunning strike, because typically the things that had it had high damage, and Cunnings have low health, so you put two and two together, typically Cunnings won't last super long. So that's why I would kind of advocate for remove them entirely, kind of shtick. Just because I think, well, besides the fact that I hate fighting swap-in attacking creatures, just because, like, the meta ones, the, like, very powerful meta ones are so difficult and so annoying to deal with. Sarah Magnus with its absurd stats of like tons of bulk, tons of damage. It has a priority speed ups move, which means it'll basically have priority for the whole time it's on the field, unless you've got something that like its counter Antarctivinator that will nullify that. But on top of that, like tons of damage and all that, and that's even like considering what you swapped they swapped into, like what they were swapping in to take out what you had survived and didn't get stunned. So there's that. And then there's Monolo Rhino with its fucking like large amount of bulk and decent damage and fuck ton of resistances, which make it. This update has just made Monolo Rhino stronger. It was already I'd say it was already tyrant material, but now I think it's certainly just with how all this like it's immune to pretty much everything you can throw at it. And here's something I think, and I'll talk about that in just like I'll expand more onto this on some things that need to be changed. I think Monolo Rhino kind of deserves a nerf, similar to Monolo Metrodon, because especially with something with this much health, like in the 4,500 range, it should not have rend resistance. Just saying. Rend resistance is kind of already a really dumb thing to have, just because having, like, sure, like, you can have immunities to and, like, resistances to, like, certain class moves, like damage over time or distraction or deceleration. But I think rending is kind of in a unique situation where it's already kind of struggles with things with low HP. Because, it deals damage based off the opponent's max HP, and, typically, the higher the HP, the more it deals, the lower, the less. So having resistance to it already makes it, like, pretty worthless in a battle. Especially since, that's probably why there's not a lot of things in the arena that, especially in the high top parts of the arena that use rending. It's just not really worth it, especially with the amount of things that are resistant or can distract it. So, and that's why I believe Mono Rhino should certainly get smacked with a nerf hammer. I think it just needs to have some of its resistances removed or toned down, specifically its rend and vulnerability resistance. It's already got tons of other good resistances that make it so annoying to deal with. Like, the only real proper counter I have for it on my team, I don't know how it is for everyone else, but my proper counters for it are Testicornibus, Pucandactylus, and Majunda Boa. That's about it. All because, more or less, because they can have speed control, and for, like, Pucandactylus, it can just distract and just kind of camp out Mono Rhino so it can't, out-camp it with its shields and its resistances. So there's that. But, and this is moving now. I should probably still focus on the post-2.9. Specifically about this whole thing of, did the Cunnings really get any better argument? And I've read, there's a Game Press article that was released earlier today that was talking about it, about specifically the high, very high, level and high tier, whatever, uniques and apexes, about how they were affected. And it was, some of them have certainly gotten better, but a lot of them are just a lot more vulnerable to being swapped in and, pretty much instantly killed. And, some of them, got really hit really fucking hard for some no goddamn reason, like Smilonemes. If you've followed me for a while, you should know, that, Smilonemes is, my favorite hybrid in the game, ever. I have two, my top three favorite things in this game are Majunda Boa, obviously, Smilonemes, and Testicornibus. Those are, my top three favorites. And I could continue going on and on, but, those are my top three, and Smilonemes is my number one, because I've loved it ever since it was introduced, and I loved its move kit. I loved how, it was unique because it had, it had 50% armor, it had distraction, it had dodge, it had shields, it had basically every form of damage mitigation in the game. And then, in this last patch, they just smacked it really fucking hard for basically no reason. I don't really remember people complaining about Nemes being, overpowered. I actually remember seeing a lot of people complaining that Nemes was underpowered and was losing relevancy, which is very much true, especially with the abundance of resilience and the apexes and the swap-in stuff. Nemes was losing its premise. So for some reason they decided, let's nerf its armor, it's, kind of its main thing, the main thing it has going for it. Let's lower that down, remove 10%, it doesn't need it. And then we remove its vulnerability resistance, because reasons. And then we change its Rampage and Run into Delayed Rampage and Run, so it has to wait a whole fucking turn in order to be able to leave. Which, listen, Delayed Rampage and Run has its purpose. It works on Forasora, because Forasora, its main issue, before they implemented that, was because it could have a back-to-back Rampage, swap in, stun, instant rampage, then rampage and run, and you've pretty much killed whatever you're fighting. But And, like, it has okay amount of health with a lot of base damage, and it's got a priority turn 1 times 2 damaging move. And then, like, pretty much immediately next turn, it can do times 2 again and then leave. So that's why they gave it delayed rampage and run. So it at least have to wait a turn, and at least, that would give whatever is facing a little bit of time, like, about a turn or so, in order to, properly be able to counter it. But for Smiling Nemes already has enough problems. Like, like I mentioned, it's vulnerable to, the abundance of resilience and resilient fierces, and the, and cunning fierce, like, a bunch of things. It's, like, relatively, like, even things it's supposed to counter give it a hard time, like Thor Dolosaur and Indoraptor and Quetzorion, stuff like that. Like, things it does well against, it has issues. And now that they've made it worse in at basically every aspect, like, just baffles me to, like, beyond reason. Because I don't get the, like, typically when I see these balance changes, I can kind of, like, find a reason why they would make a change like that. Like, not always, but typically it's like, I guess, I imagine at certain levels with a lot of boosts, that could have been a problem. But for things like Smiling Nemes, like, this nerf just makes no sense to me. It feels like what they were just doing was purposely crippling it so that Schoonosaurus could take the top spot as best cunning resilient. And hey, with this new buff, it was like, with the last buff it got and this new one, it was already, it already had taken Smiling Nemes' spot as the best cunning resilient. So now it's just like, now they're just kicking it while it's down. And which is a real shame, because I love Smiling Nemes and I hate seeing, like, this kind of stuff happen. So yeah, still upset about that. I'm gonna complain about this until they fix it, so you better get used to my complaining. I love this thing to death. It is my favorite thing in this game. Alright. Alright, back to, where am I? What were the topics I had written down? Okay, other things that need to be changed. I feel the resilient, like, change was a good step in the right direction, but it kind of more or less has made a new problem emerge, and that was the like I mentioned earlier, the more or less dominance of the swap-in creatures, especially things like Sarah Magnus. But also, this has just made a lot of resilience so much better. Like, Hadros Lux, sure, it can't slow anymore, but its damage output now is immense. And now that people realize this, if you're in the high arenas, expect tons of, near, if not max damage, Hadros, because the amount of damage they can deal in only a short amount of time is insane, to say the least. And there's probably a proper solution to this. Especially, I think the resilient change was good, but they just didn't touch everything properly. Like, the cunnings didn't... Some cunnings, like Smiling Nemes, got direct nerfs. And a lot of current cunnings got indirect nerfs from the resilient change. So what I think they need to do now, because I think the resilient change is fine the way it is, because I don't really have any other kind of solution. Because, like, we're not obviously not giving them the slowing ability back, but what else are we going to do? I think the vulnerability change is good, but I think the main thing they need to do from now on is they need to, one, introduce some more proper, like, good cunnings, and we need the other cunnings, we need to give them buffs, like, compensative buffs. Like, things that struggled with this patch are things like Erlicospix, Erladominus, Quetzorion, Smiling Nemes, Compsocallis, and a bunch of others just there's a bunch of cunnings that haven't been touched. So that's it would be beneficial for them, especially since like some of the cool new cunnings that have been introduced, like Referentum, Hydroboa, Hast Maximus, they're not going to see much in terms of like actual proper arena use, just because resilience. I hate to say this, but like they are still dominant and they are still meta defining because their strength is they didn't really get worse, they've just gotten better in a different way. Meanwhile, Cunnings didn't really get anything. So that's what we need to, more or less, that's what Ludia needs to focus on, and that's what I think everyone in the community should start, talking about and trying to tell Ludia directly or indirectly on the forums. And that's, hey, that Cunnings are still underpowered because, you refuse to touch them or give them proper buffs, or sometimes you just flat out fucking nerf them for no reason. Or, since 2.9, well, 2.0, you get them completely worthless kits like Dilitokairos. Remember when Dilitokairos was actually meta, like back when it had like 2 rampages and like it was kind of, you were pretty much needed it on your team in order to be dominant, in a similar situation to you at a Rhinex. But now it's kind of completely worthless, I think. And this more or less kind of goes back to a problem I think also needs to be addressed of, we need to focus on making most of the creatures in the game, most hybrids and all that, both viable for both PvP and raids. Because there are some that are only good in PvP, and then there are some that are only good in raids, and there are some that are not good in either, and that sucks. So we should give proper attention to our players, our important key players in this interesting arena we have. And I'm running out of topics here, so I guess more or less the final topic I'll talk about, well, I guess second to last topic I'll talk about is my current arena experience and the fact that I've recently reached Lockwood Library, and I used to think Aviary was bad. It is nothing compared to what Lockwood Library is. There are Sarah Magnuses and Hadros Lux and the Thordalsaurs and all that out the wazoo, and that makes things so much more difficult. So, but I've been managing. What the hell? So, sounds outside my house. Weird sounds. Yeah, it's been interesting. And another thing I want to mention, because this has kind of gotten me a little miffed, but it's in a way that doesn't really make sense. And that's just kind of, I'm a little mad that I've been seeing, especially with the top players, it's in the higher arenas, they're using, I'm seeing a rise in use of Testicornibus, which I should be happy for, right? Testicornibus is my second favorite creature in the game. So I'm happy, I should be happy to see it. But maybe it's just because, the reason why I'm upset is because, once again, it's in a situation that I call, they're only using it because it's good now. Therefore, I kind of hate them for it. Especially, I guess this more or less boils down to my general hatred of the meta as a whole, and especially the top players. I don't like them for the same reason I don't like rich people. I think they don't exactly deserve the position they're in, and the fact that, especially with Jurassic World Live, this was pretty much argued ever since the game was released, that it's still very much a pay-to-win model, like, especially since, like, VIP and all that, and that, like, VIP people get, like, tons of boosts, sales, and all that. And, the terms, whales, and all that, like, they're people who haven't actually tried, like, for a good long while, I was pretty much entirely free to play for pretty much the entirety, like, of my, time at playing the game up until, like, a year ago when I got, like, a Apple gift card for Christmas, and I used that money to buy an incubator. So, like, and every now and then I buy things from the shop, like, not very expensive things. It's typically, I buy bucks or coins or occasionally exclusive DNA that I don't have a lot of. Like, recently I used some of my money to buy the Megalonyx because I wanted to unlock it. Because I couldn't be fucked to wait for the raid like a day later. But I generally kind of hate a lot of the people in the higher arenas, and especially now that they're using my baby, my Testicornibus, like one of my favorite things in the game, just because it's good now, and that they don't, like, there's no actual kind of respect in the arena. I mean, we should all know this. It's the arena, emote spammers. Like, I see you, emote spammers. Like, if you think you're funny, you're not. You're just an annoying prick. So, and that's probably what you're trying to be. You're trying to piss off who you're fighting because you bought your way into the arena instead of, grinding. Especially since the main issue with, like, the pay-to-win model is that, like, there are people, I know tons of people who play this game who've played it since launch, and, like, aren't even near, like, close to, like, the people at the top of the arena. Like, just because, like, it's really hard to keep up with an ever-shifting meta if you can't spend any money on, resources you might need. Like with this, like, sudden meta shift, like, things with Testicornibus, like, it's good now, so people are starting to use it. But, like, here's the thing: nobody's been stocking up DNA. Who would it? Like, who would stock up DNA? Most Jurassic World Life players don't have the incentive to stock up on DNA they consider, like, worthless in big quotation marks, like Eucladoceros or Nazutoceratops and stuff like that. But maybe that's just me, because I like to stock up on DNA that I typically wouldn't find a use for, because I know eventually I will, because I have a lot of side projects that I work on. Like, right now, like I've mentioned before, I'm working on maxing and boosting my Carnotarchus, because Carnotarchus, sure, it's kind of mediocre for a legendary, and it's, it lacks resistances and generally has far more losing matchups than it does winning, but I can make it work. I've secured some pretty close some pretty tight victories because of Carnotarchus, and I'm going to continue to do that with a bunch of other things that are, underused or underutilized. So seeing these people who have never once in their life considered Testicornibus, like, even worthy. Like, it's like, yeah, whatever, it's a testicle deer, whatever. And they toss it aside. Meanwhile, I've been using it ever since it was released. Like, it's kind of, I say soulless, because I feel like these people just don't understand what it's like to be an underdog. And that's the whole thing. It's like, it's kind of the reason why I compare the people in the higher parts of the arena to the rich, because much like them, I despise the rich, and I despise the people who have never actually worked hard to get to where they are. They just kind of, like, strived off their own, staved? It's like they've only gotten there because they have money, and they haven't actually put in any effort. So there's that. So, to all of you people just suddenly using Testacornibus, like, unless you were, like, really wanting to use it beforehand, like, before this new change, and you just couldn't unlock it, like, I'd say, like, fuck you, fuck off, like, you're not cool. I'm cool. I'm the cool one here, because I was using it first, and now I sound like a pretentious prick. But, it's my show, I can be whatever I want. So, there's that. Other than that, I am happy with most of the changes from 2.9, and we certainly have a lot more to work on, and hopefully that'll be, we'll get that addressed soon. Like, there are some things that still need to be addressed, like, games still lags like shit sometimes, and also, like, evasive wounding strike is it's got a delay for no reason, like, and it's not shown on its in-game, like, it's not shown on its description in the game. It just doesn't work on turn 1, even though on the patch notes it was shown to not have a delay. So if they could address that, Spino Constrictor might actually be able to survive this new meta. Because right now it's been struggling a little bit. And also, I do want to address a comment I got, like, on the last video. Someone asked if I thought Testacornibus, Antarctivinator, Pucandactylus, and Spino Constrictor would be material for Tyrant. And I'd say not all of them. I think Testacornibus might be able to break into Tyrant. I mean, then again, like, who knows? Like, there aren't really any good pure Fierces, which is another issue I'd really like to see Ludia address. There are basically no endgame pure Fierce super hybrids. Like, I can only name 2 that are, like, have use in the arena, and that's Thor Dolosaur and Triostronics. And, Thor Dolosaur, we all know what it's like to play against and use Thor. It's boring, it's monotonous, and, like, it's easily countered. Trio is a little more interesting. It's got to be a lot more careful, but it's like it falls victim to a what I'd like to call a setup complex, where sometimes when it's setting up against something, it can just lose, especially since something like it is very much vulnerable to swap-in attacks. So that's why you don't see it used that much. It's certainly helpful for raids, and it's kind of been labeled a raid bitch, like, in terms of just, like, you have to have one if you want to mooch off everyone else's work in order to unlock things like Sarah Magnus or Hatris Lux or Mortem. So, I'd like to see Ludia introduce some more pure Fierces, and hey, I could probably, like, one of these episodes, I could go through and talk about my own ideas for some pure Fierces to spice up the arena. But, where was I beforehand? I was talking about, Testacornibus and the other, like, buff uniques. I think Testacornibus might be able to break into Tyrant. It's not guaranteed, but, like, it's got a lot of better matchups now. Especially since, like, a lot of the things it faces can no longer really, or weaker due to the whole vulnerability change thing. It is impossible to swap out or swap in on Testacornibus just because of, like, the change. Like, armor increase, health increase, damage increase, and the healing counter, and, like, the cleansing deceleration impact. Like, that's helpful. So, Testacornibus might be Tyrant material. Probably will be. We'll have to see. Then again, I don't exactly care that much for, like, the meta tier list, because whenever I see a tier list, like the tier list that like GamePress puts out, I just look at the Tyrant and I just I use it as like an enemy list. Like I use it as a way determining what I hate in the arena the most. Because typically the things that are at the top of the arena I hate just because they're overabundant and everyone uses them because it's good. Instead of like, people used to use things just because they liked them instead of just conforming to the meta. And like I get it, some people like things and they're also meta, but like where are my Trostronic users? Where are my like Spinotasuchus users? Where are my literally anything that isn't in Tyrant tier or, Tyrant or Apex below? Like, I haven't seen like anyone. Like last interesting thing I saw was a max level Velociraptor. That was about it. But moving on, Antarctivinator. I think Antarctivinator is certainly situated itself in Tyrant, or at least probably is really close, probably high Apex, if not Tyrant. Just because it's like, it's got the revenge definite and the health and damage increase, and like generally like it's completely immune to vulnerability, so that whole its biggest weakness was deceleration and also its low speed. So like one of those is gone now. Now its only real problem is how slow it is, but that's nothing a few boosts can't fix. But yeah, so I think Antarctivinator is probably definitely high Tyrant, or if not, like low Tyrant or high Apex material. And for Pucandactylus and Spinoconstrictor, I'd say no. I think they're probably in high Apex, at least. Pucandactylus and Spinoconstrictor still have their issues. Pucand is better, but has things like Hadros Lux and Schoonosaurus can still pretty easily fuck it up pretty quickly, especially considering it doesn't really have a basic strike attack anymore like it used to. So sometimes on a turn, especially if it's facing something that's resilient, it'll have basically no options, because both of its moves are priority. It's either instant distraction or side flap, which when you're facing against something like a resilient, you're basically dead. And then for Spinoconstrictor, that whole delay on if that's an actual intended feature for the evasive wounding strike, then Spinoconstrictor's gonna really struggle. But it's gotten better. It's certainly better. I'm happy that it's been improved. It's finally good for once in its life. But other than that, I think nothing has really changed in terms of what is in Tyrant. Scorpius Rex is still, Scorpius Gen 3 is still obviously the best Cunning Fierce, and Ceramactus and Hadros Lux are still the best Resilience, and Schoonosaurus is definitely still the best Cunning Resilience, and there is currently a lack of Pure Fierces and whatnot, but we'll have to see. I really hope Ludia addresses some of the major issues in the upcoming update, because I imagine this next one probably will have to be a big one. And I believe with that, I'm going to wrap up this episode. This actually went longer than I thought it would have been. Thought this would only been 15 minutes, but then I rambled, and now we're sitting at 34. So I'm going to wrap this up. So I'll just end it, more or less. So I'll try and record, what I say, always trying to record a new episode as soon as I can. So let me know what your thoughts are. Give me suggestions for topics, because, I don't always have the greatest ideas. And I'll see you real soon. Majunda out.
This is a certified hood classic.